Today's video is brought to you by Card Kingdom, and you can pre-order all the Double Masters cards you need now over at cardkingdom.com. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for our penultimate day of daily Double Master spoilers. That's right, tomorrow the full set is revealed, so we are almost at the end of Double Master spoiler season, but we still have some really sweet cards to talk about today. We got some really good mythics since yesterday, so we should probably talk about them, start breaking down these sweet new reprints. And first off today, we have sword number 5. That's right, the full original sword cycle coming back in Double Masters, with Sword of Light and Shadow being the final missing piece of the puzzle. Again, like all the swords, coming with awesome box topper art, again at Mythic. So Sword of Light and Shadow, that's the pro white and black sword, and it is one of the, I would say, better-ish swords for formats like Modern. It does see a bit of play in Modern and Legacy. It really depends on the metagame. I think that Fire and Ice and Feast and Famine are still probably like 1 and 2, but then Light and Shadow does answer like Fatal Push and Path to Exile with its protection, its abilities, gaining life. That's relevant against aggro, getting back creatures, better in some decks than others, but it is a sword that does occasionally show up in decks like Stoneforge Mystic, in Modern and Legacy. It also sees some play in Commander. It definitely ranks behind Feast and Famine and Fire and Ice in the Commander format, but it does see play primarily in equipment-based decks, Akiris and Kembas and Nahiris and Baitlands. I feel like we've talked about these cards a million times. I guess it's because we talk about a different sword every day, but if you're playing a equipment-based commander deck, Sword of Light and Shadow is at least in the conversation. Gaining 3 life, not super helpful in commander, but being able to get a creature back from your graveyard every turn and prevent some amount of removal on your best threat is a pretty reasonable option. So Sword of Light and Shadow, also worth mentioning, fairly valuable. Its new price is like $35. It was more than that. The box topper coming in at $200 right off the bat. So box toppers for all the swords going to be ridiculously expensive, but still, even the normal version, definitely not a bad card to open, even in a $15 pack. So sweet to see the whole sword cycle back once again, bringing prices down for commander players, modern players, legacy players, whoever needs them. Speaking of swords, technically we got another sword, Sword of the Meek. So Sword of the Meek, upshifted from uncommon to rare, although in this case, Sword of the Meek, it probably does deserve to be rare. I honestly think if Sword of the Meek was printed today with the synergies and combos that exist for it, it would probably be a rare. In the past, when there were no synergies and it was just kind of like this janky thing, then it was an uncommon, but basically Sword of the Meek, it doesn't look like much. 2 mana, 2 to equip, gives a creature +1/+2. However, when a 1/1 comes into play under your control, you can return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to your battlefield, attach it to a creature, and it's that ability that opens up combos. And that is why Sword of the Meek is like $10. It sees a decent amount of play because with the help of Thopter Foundry, it just goes infinite. Thopter Foundry also coming back in Double Master. So again, this is a combo you can try to pull off in Limited. Might be another reason that Sword got upshifted. I assume that Wizards didn't want the Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo to show up really often in Limited, more once in a while, because it is actually very difficult to deal with. But Thopter Foundry lets you sack a non-token artifact to make a 1/1 Thopter, and you gain a life. So basically, if you get them both, you can sack Sword of the Meek, that makes a 1/1, gains you life, that brings Sword of the Meek back into play from the graveyard because a 1/1 entered the battlefield. Then you can sacrifice Sword of the Meek again, make a 1/1, gain a life, get another Thopter. So essentially, for each mana you have, you can gain a life and make a 1/1 flyer. So you don't just go like infinite, make a million tokens, win the game immediately, but you win the game over the course of a few turns, and it is very difficult to interact with. Like, you can blow up Thopter Foundry, you can exile the graveyard, but it is an annoyingly difficult counter to Actrid because Sword keeps coming back from the graveyard. Because of this, the combo shows up in like Urza decks in Modern, sometimes Goblin Engineer decks where you can tutor up both combo pieces. So it is a fairly competitive combo, and I mean, a decent reprint. Can't really go wrong. Sword of the Meek is a card that hadn't been reprinted in a while. It's going to be fun to try to pull off the combo in Limited. And it's a card that, because it sees play in Modern, would probably keep slowly ticking up in price. So getting another reprint out there now, even at rare, will help keep that price in check. Next up today, we have a card that I honestly can't believe it hadn't been reprinted already. Mana Echoes. 4 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may add an amount of colorless mana equal to the number of creatures you control that share a type with it. So if you're playing a tribal deck in Commander, this card can make a ridiculous amount of mana. It gets absolutely absurd. There's combos with it, etc., etc., etc. So Mana Echoes is almost $50. It is super expensive, and that is because Mana Echoes has been printed exactly one time, and that was all the way back in Onslaught. We're talking 20 plus years ago, the only time it had ever been reprinted. Like, it's not even modern legal. That's how old this is, and it hasn't been reprinted a single time. So because of Commander demand, it just keeps ticking up and ticking up. I remember a few years ago buying a collection, and Mana Echoes was like $5. Like, oh, that's sweet, I'll buy these out. And now it's like $50 because it just keeps going up and up and up. So Mana Echoes, it isn't like an ultra staple in Commander because it is restricted to tribal decks primarily. Like, if you're just playing a mismatch of creatures, Mana Echoes isn't going to do very much. On the other hand, if you're playing Sliver Queen, for example, that's like the easiest combo. It just goes infinite Sliver Queen, 2 mana to make a Sliver token. Obviously, you have a few slivers around, so you pay 2 mana to make a sliver. That sliver with Mana Echoes is going to make like 10 mana, and then you make a sliver, you get 11 mana that time, then another one, and 12 mana. So it makes infinite mana, makes infinite slivers. It's also good with just commanders that can go wide with tokens, like Cranko Mob Boss. Makes a ton of goblins. When they all come into play, when you have Mana Echoes, you're going to make like 100 mana. Sethron Hurloon General, one of the new additions. Even the Locust God can take advantage of it. So outside of combos, tribal-based, token-based commander decks, very much like Mana Echoes, and it does insane things. If you ever see this come down on the battlefield, in a deck like Cranko or Silver Queen, you gotta get rid of it right away, because it's going to make like hundreds of mana. It is absolutely absurd what it could do. So, this is a great reprint. I'm actually surprised it hadn't been reprinted already. It's been so long, and this will hopefully help get the price down a bit, allow more players to put it in their commander decks, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because the card could be busted to the right deck, but gonna make it more accessible, which I think overall is definitely a good thing. Speaking of mythics, we also got Scarab God. So Scarab God is a card that has some value. It's currently like $22-ish, so not a bad mythic to open, like some that we've talked about. Another decent mythic open. And Scarab God, you probably know what it does. It was the best card in Standard a few years ago when it was in the format. Sees Fringe play in other formats, and what I didn't realize is that Scarab God is the second most played Dimir commander in the entire format, and one of the top 50 most played commanders overall. Eureka takes number 1 for Dimir by a pretty wide margin. That's the most popular Dimir commander. But Scarab God is next up behind Eureka as far as commanders that players want to build around in Dimir, and it's already like $22, so this reprinting will hopefully keep the price in check, allow more players to build Scarab God. Plus, it's a $5.99 card as well. Being able to essentially reanimate something from any graveyard for 4 mana is really powerful. It does also see Fringe play in formats like Pioneer, and even in Modern to some extent. Not recently, but it goes back and forth. Once in a while it shows up. Decks like Niv Mizzet Reborn can find it, shows up in that Pioneer deck. It's seen playing like Dimir control decks in the past in Modern. So Scarab God, because of its high commander demand and its Fringe applications in other formats, perfectly fine with that showing up at Mythic. Definitely a good card to have more of in the wild, especially because so many players need it for Commander. We also got the rest of the filter lands, I guess, in keeping with the Double Masters theme. Instead of 5 rare lands, which is most common in a set, we're getting 10 rare lands. So, Twilight Mire, Rugged Berry, Flooded Grove, Fetid Eve, Cascade Bluffs. These are cards that are less exciting than the Allied versions, just because they've been reprinted more. The Allied versions hadn't been reprinted. This version was in Masters 25, which means the price is going to be even lower. Right now, they're in the like $10 range, but judging by what we've seen, I'm guessing you're going to be able to pick these up for a few dollars, $3, $4, $5 when all is said and done. So expect prices to come down significantly, which on one hand is a good thing. Cheaper filter lands is helpful for players. On the other hand, as we talked about with the other half of the cycle, the filter lands just aren't really that heavily played anymore. Like, sometimes you play them in Commander, they don't really see play in Modern or Legacy, they're not legal in Pioneer or Standard, so while you will be able to get them on the cheap, and being cheap does increase their demand, I think, in Commander, because as a budget dual land, these lands are actually pretty solid. They come into play untapped, they fix your mana pretty well if you have crazy mana costs, so maybe the demand will go up because they're going to be so cheap now that they're going to be arguably budget friendly. Like before, if you're going to spend $20 on a land, it's almost always correct to get a, let's start with a fetch land, followed by a shock land, followed by like a fast land, and there's so many options if you're going to spend that amount of money. But when you get down to $4 and you're in the argument with a bunch of like scry lands and lands that come into play tapped, then these lands become much more appealing for Commander players. So that's the good news, going to be super duper cheap. Unfortunately, not the most exciting land cycle. Could you imagine if Double Mastered had all 10 fetch lands? People would be going absolutely insane right now. But still, more filter lands, not a bad thing. Price is going to be cheap. Get them for budget Commander decks, and that's a benefit for players. As far as rares, we got some decent mid-range stuff. Maelstrom Pulse, only like $3, but it is a powerful removal spell. Does he play in Modern? I put it in Commander decks as well, and it wasn't that long ago that this card was like $25, $30, but with constant reprintings, Wizards has put it in a lot of Master Set, and also the printing of Assassin's Trophy is part of it too. Like, Maelstrom Pulse used to be sometimes like a 3 of, or even a 4 of index like Jund in Modern, but now it's more like a 1 of type of thing, because you got Assassin's Trophy, you got Abrupt Decay competing with it, but because of those factors, more supply and lower demand, it's down to like $3. So if you need copies, you can get them on the cheap now. We also got Awakening Zone, which I've always loved this card. It's like a weird ramp spell that's also a weird token producer. Every turn, you get a Eldrazi spawn token that you can sacrifice for a mana. Its main home today is in sacrifice-based Commander decks. Corvold loves it. It's free card draw with Corvold and free mana. Griswold, Vivictus, you can keep sacking the Eldrazi spawn while your opponent's got to sacrifice real things. Maybe spin it into something big. So that's its main home, still worth like $5, so actually not a bad rare because of this casual Commander demand. So definitely another decent reprint, although again, not exciting like a Noble Hierarch or a Snapcaster Mage or something. Speaking of sacrifice Commander decks, High Market, another nice mid-range rare, a land that comes into play untapped and lets you sacrifice a creature. Its effect is only getting you 1 life, which isn't exciting, but really, if you need a sacrifice outlet and you want it on a land in something like Marin or Atla Palini or Corvold, High Market is a great way to get the job done. So another decent mid-range Commander focus rare. We also got a couple of bulk rares. Disciple Bolas, it is a true bulk rare, but at least it's a good card. Like, Disciple Bolas is a card I like to play in Black Commander decks, offering a lot of card advantage. Leona Nabonas, I guess you could play that in an artifact-based Commander deck, although I rarely ever see anyone play Leona Nabonas, and I rarely ever play it myself. Giving your artifacts hexproof, I guess, is nice, but it still just dies. It doesn't have any special abilities. Mostly just bulk rares rounding out the set, though. As far as prices today, just a quick check-in, no real major shifts since yesterday. Average Mythic, still at $26, Midian still at $19, so essentially the same as yesterday, with some of the high-value Mythics, Scarab God, Mana Echoes, Sword of Light and Shadow coming in, either outweighed or even out by the low-value Mythics we talked about yesterday, and also by prices continuing to fall a little bit. As far as rares, you can see average rare, 408, Midian, $2, so basically the same as we talked about yesterday. I will warn you, though, this is a bit inflated right now, mostly because of the new filter lands. So right now, Cascade Bluffs, Fetid Heath, Flooded Grove, Rugged Prairie, Twilight Mire all look like really solid rares in the like $10 to $12 range for the most part. However, that's a little bit deceptive. We saw the first half of the cycle that was spoiled. If you look at those essentially across the board are much, much cheaper, capping out at $8, with some of them in the $2 to $3 price range. And in general, this was a cycle that was more expensive because it hadn't been reprinted heading into Double Masters. So keep in mind that this number is going to drop a decent amount from these lands heading down towards like $5, $4 rather than $10 to $12. But right now, that means that on average, you're pretty much going to break even. I mean, almost exactly with a $15 pack. When you toss in the commons and uncommons, you're looking at almost exactly $15. Plus, there's some value from the foils that isn't included yet. Then you get box toppers potentially. So the EV is looking solid. Don't worry, once the set is out, I will do kind of like a summary where we can break down everything with the box toppers, with the foils, with the commons and uncommons, with prices theoretically changing over the next week as we get more pre-sales, as prices go down. So anyway, that's been our daily spoilers for today. We will be back tomorrow. I think there's not really much left, honestly. We're at 97% of rares, 95% of mythics. So assuming there are some more cards worth talking about, we'll be back tomorrow for one last video. Until then, what do you think about the rest of the filter lands? What about the mythics that we got today? Scarab God, Mana Echoes, the rest of the swords. What do you think about those? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.